Greetings, fast-paced readers. You're tuned into Read Books Faster, the channel where we breeze through books without missing the essence. Our latest summary, What's Our Problem?, is crafted to convey the full story, just as the author intended, but quicker. We cover each chapter in detail, ensuring that you capture the book's essence authentically and engagingly. If you're looking to understand and enjoy books deeply but quickly, you're at the right spot. Let's get started. The big picture. Picture this. If human history were condensed into a fat book called The Story of Us, it'd be one heck of a page-turner. We're talking about a saga spanning over 200,000 to 300,000 years. But here's the kicker: if every page covered just 250 years, that book would be a whopping 1,000 pages thick. Now, imagine laying out those pages on a table. As we step back and take a good look, we realize something fascinating. Most of what we consider ancient history, it's all crammed into the very last pages of that mammoth book. The agricultural revolution starts around page 950 or 960. Recorded history kicks off at about page 976, and Christianity doesn't even make an appearance until page 993. Yep, everything from the early 1770s to the early 2020s. That's all packed into page 1000. That's US history for you. But wait, hold onto your hats, folks, because we're about to step into the mysterious new world of page 101. And let me tell you, it's a roller coaster of excitement and fear, all wrapped up in 3 juicy facts. Fact number 1. Technology is on a rocket ship to the moon. Think about it: if we plucked someone from page 760 and dropped them onto page 761, sure, they'd need to update their Facebook friends, but life wouldn't be too jarring. But fast forward to someone from page 999 getting a sneak peek at page 1000. Well, let's just say it might knock their socks off. Why? Because the later you live in the story, the more mind-blowing those jumps become. Our world, it's anything but normal. It's on the fast track of exponential technological growth, baby. Which brings us to fact number 2. With great technology comes great responsibility and risk. Sure, more tech means better Netflix binges, but it also means scarier nightmares. Think about it, page 999. Enlightenment, prosperity, the whole shebang. But also, slavery, imperialism, and 2 world wars that could put Godzilla to shame. And now, here we are on page 1000, enjoying unprecedented wealth and freedom, but also staring down the barrel of nuclear warfare and climate change. Yikes. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom, right? Because fact number 3, it's about us. And let's be real, we're acting like a bunch of toddlers who just dropped their ice cream. Tribalism? Check. Political chaos? Check. Trust? Going, gone. And the worst part? We're not learning from our mistakes. Like, at all. So, where does that leave us? Well, imagine those giant beings, society itself, trudging up a mountain toward a glorious future. But here's the kicker: the higher we climb, the steeper the cliffs, and the thinner the ridge. One wrong step, and it's game over. But hey, chin up, folks. We might not have mentors or editors, but we've got each other. And if we can just get a little wiser, a little braver, well, who knows? Maybe page 101 will be the start of our greatest adventure yet. So, buckle up, dear readers, because the story of us, it's just getting started. And trust me, you won't want to miss a single page. Chapter 1. The Ladder. Welcome to the Animal Kingdom, a place filled with eternal genetic battles and survival strategies. Humans, as unique animals, have evolved cognitive superpowers that have allowed us to create the complex world of civilization. But here's the catch: our brains are still running on ancient survival software designed for a different world. Picture this: moths mindlessly fluttering towards artificial lights, a misfire in their navigational system due to rapid human changes. Similarly, humans, like moths, often find themselves in situations where their ancient brain software struggles to adapt to modern society. Enter the duo living in your head, the primitive mind and the higher mind. The primitive mind operates based on survival instincts, while the higher mind is the rational thinker. When all is well, the higher mind is steering the ship, ensuring you make smart decisions. But when the primitive mind takes the reins, you might find yourself making impulse buys at the drugstore or devouring a bag of Skittles despite knowing better. This internal struggle is like a tug-of-war between the higher and lower rungs of a metaphorical ladder. At the top rung, we have the scientist, who approaches beliefs with skepticism, constantly seeking truth through evidence and revision. Descend a bit, and you'll find yourself in sports fan territory, where biases and motivated reasoning can cloud judgment, but are open to changing beliefs with strong evidence. Further down is the attorney, who starts with a predetermined belief like a lawyer defending a client, and manipulates evidence to suit the desired outcome. Finally, at the bottom rung, resides the zealot, who views their beliefs as sacred babies, unwavering in conviction and resistant to change. As humans, we often find ourselves oscillating between these rungs in our decision-making, affecting our beliefs, actions, and interactions with the world. Join us on a journey through the intricacies of the human mind and the challenges we face in navigating the complexities of our beliefs and behaviors in society. High-rung thinking, low-rung thinking. Imagine a world where there are 4 different types of thinkers: the scientist, the sports fan, the attorney, and the zealot. Now, these thinkers exist on a ladder with the scientist on the highest rung, followed by the sports fan, then the attorney, and finally the zealot on the lowest rung. High-rung thinking represents independent thinking at its finest. It allows you to adapt, change, or even abandon your ideas based on new evidence. However, low-rung thinking is embedded in stubbornness, where no amount of proof can alter your beliefs. In low-rung thinking, you become a slave to your ideas rather than the master of your thoughts. High-rung thinking is like a sponge, absorbing knowledge and wisdom from life experiences, while low-rung thinking repels such growth, bouncing off life experiences like water on a rubber shell. We all fluctuate between these rungs, often unaware of when we slip to a lower level. Our minds become clouded by the influence of our primitive minds, making low-rung thinking persist without us even realizing it. The goal is to spend more time on the high rungs, constantly evolving and improving our intellectual selves. Moving forward, our individual thinking is deeply entwined with the people around us. We are social beings, and our thought processes are often shaped by the cultures we inhabit. Intellectual cultures. In the world of intellectual cultures, every group has its own set of unwritten rules that shape how ideas are expressed and debated within that community. Picture these cultures as invisible gas clouds surrounding the members when they gather. These cultures have a significant influence on individuals within the group. Those who align with the cultural norms are rewarded with acceptance and respect, while those who deviate may face ridicule or ostracism. Living in multiple cultures simultaneously is part of being human, each with its unique norms and values. The challenge lies in balancing our individual values with the expectations of the various cultures we belong to, whether it be at work, with friends, or in our families. Intellectual cultures dictate how ideas are shared within a group, shaping the way members think and interact. They can either encourage critical thinking and debate, as seen in idea labs, or promote conformity and groupthink, as observed in echo chambers. In idea labs, open-mindedness, humility, and respect for diverse viewpoints are celebrated. Individuals engage in constructive debates, test hypotheses, and challenge each other's ideas without taking arguments personally. On the flip side, echo chambers are breeding grounds for groupthink and conformity. Here, individuals are pressured to conform to a set of sacred beliefs, discouraging dissent and critical thinking. Challenging these beliefs can lead to social repercussions, reinforcing the group's norms through a system of rewards and penalties. The type of intellectual culture we inhabit influences our growth and learning. Idea labs foster intellectual and moral development, while echo chambers stifle innovation and limit knowledge acquisition. Spending too much time in an echo chamber can inflate one's ego, diminish humility, and hinder individual growth. Ultimately, the intellectual culture we engage with can act as either a support system, like an idea lab pulling us upward on the ladder of thinking, or a hindrance, like an echo chamber exerting a downward pull on our mental processes. High-Rung giants, Jennies. We delve into the intricacies of the human brain and its remarkable capabilities when working together. Tim Urban takes us on a journey up the emergence tower, likening the interconnectedness of neurons in our brains to a group of people coming together to form a communal brain through the power of language. Drawing on insights from social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, we explore how diversity of thought within a group can lead to better decision-making and truth-seeking. This collaborative thinking system, referred to as a genie, thrives on open-mindedness and encourages the challenging of ideas to reach higher levels of collaboration and knowledge. As we journey through idea lab culture and research institutions, we discover how Jennies can scale up globally, combining forces to become super Jennies through constructive criticism and collective intelligence. The key to the genie's success lies in the independence of its members, where individual thinking merges seamlessly with group dynamics to foster innovation and learning. On the flip side, Urban introduces us to the concept of low-rung giants, golems, drawing parallels with the Mongol army's ruthless tactics of obedience and conformity. Golems represent the darker side of group mentality, where strict adherence to authority and an us vs. them mindset override individuality and critical thinking. From the heights of Jennies to the depths of golems, Urban invites us to ponder the balance between collaborative genius and oppressive conformity in our quest for knowledge and progress. Join me as we unravel the complexities of human cognition and societal behavior in the age-old battle between collective intelligence and brute force. So buckle up and let's explore the heights and depths of human giants in the evolving landscape of ideas and cultures. Interlude, the liberal games. Welcome to a riveting chapter where we delve into the animal kingdom's fierce power games and explore how humanity transitioned from merely surviving to thriving with the help of Jennies. Now, picture a world where a bear and a bunny coexist, but the rules are simple: might makes right. The bear can eat the bunny if it's quick enough, and the bunny's only hope is its speed. This is the essence of the power games. Throughout history, humans found themselves in a similar predicament, navigating through life's challenges like the bear and the bunny. That is until they stumbled upon the ultimate cheat code: mass cooperation. This ingenious hack gave birth to Jennies, surpassing any weapon with their intellect and innovation. As civilizations flourished, it wasn't humans at the helm of progress, but these Jennies, constantly evolving and sharing knowledge across time and space. But with great power comes great peril. Enter the Golem, a formidable adversary eclipsing any bear or predator. From the Assyrians to the Mongols, civilizations learned the hard way that when a Golem knocks on your door, civilization's niceties crumble in the face of brute force. To survive, you had to be able to create a more robust golem of your own to fend off threats. Yet, as we evolved, so did our mindset. The primitive mind, hardwired for survival in the power games, had to adapt. The key lay in transcending our primal impulses, paving the way for a groundbreaking idea that took root in 1776 rebellion with a purpose. Unlike the usual merry-go-round of toppled tyrants, the American forefathers had a grander vision thanks to the Enlightenment. During this intellectual awakening, a radical notion spread like wildfire, one that challenged the very foundations of the power game's morality. Human rights, legal equality, and freedom weren't just philosophical musings, but a battle cry for a fairer society. The American colonies became a hotbed of dissent as Enlightenment kids dared to dream of a better future. And so, a letter was penned to London, setting off a chain of events that led to war. George Washington, thrust into leadership amid his mother's disapproval, rallied the troops alongside a gleeful France to secure America's independence. With victory in hand, a newfound freedom beckoned, offering a blank canvas to realize the Enlightenment's lofty ideals. In the aftermath of conflict, the Americans faced a rare opportunity, the chance to craft a nation from scratch, a utopia where Enlightenment principles could thrive. The stage is set for an audacious experiment as the American dream transforms into a tangible reality, a testament to humanity's enduring quest for a fairer, more enlightened world. Designing the American Giant. Here we dive deep into understanding how human activity can be boiled down to a simple operation, all depending on the environment they find themselves in. Imagine a world where rulers of the past governed with an iron fist and strict laws, a world where power was the name of the game. This was the power games environment, where might made right, and freedom was a luxury few could afford. But then came the era of the Enlightenment, where thinkers believed in a kinder, fairer form of governance, the liberal games. In the United States, the promises of the country were formalized in the U.S. Constitution, a sacred set of rules that outlined not just outcomes, but a process that would protect citizens from their own government by limiting its power. The liberal games aimed at balancing freedom and responsibility, ensuring that every citizen had the right to pursue their interests as long as they did not harm others. The heart of the liberal games lies in the compromise that everyone can do what they want as long as it doesn't infringe on others. It's a delicate balance of rights and restrictions, ensuring both freedom and safety for all citizens. This concept of justice and fairness is at the core of the American system, providing equal opportunities under the law. Enlightenment thinkers believed that the liberal games would not only fulfill philosophical ideals, but also drive productivity and progress in society. By shifting the focus from coercion to persuasion, the liberal games encouraged citizens to provide value to one another rather than dominate through force. Within this framework, the principle of free speech emerged as a cornerstone of the marketplace of ideas. It allowed for the free exchange of thoughts and opinions, ensuring that the best ideas would rise to the top through civil discourse and debate. Yet, despite the ideals of the liberal games, the primitive nature of humans often clashes with the principles of liberty and equality. Every U.S. citizen carries within them a piece of this primitive software that speaks a different language, challenging the strength of the liberal norms that bind society together. American history is a testament to the nation's struggle against itself, a constant battle between the Enlightenment values enshrined in the Constitution and the primitive instincts that lurk beneath the surface. The strength of the nation ultimately lies in its ability to uphold these liberal norms, ensuring that the American giant can stand tall and true. So, as we continue to unravel the intricacies of the American giant, remember that the true test lies in our ability to embrace the ideals of freedom, equality, and opportunity that define the liberal games. Chapter 2: Politics on the Ladder. Now, when we think about politics in the United States, we often simplify it to a two-party system, red for the conservatives and blue for the progressives. But is it really that straightforward? Let's peel back the layers and unravel the complexities that lie beneath the surface. The terms liberal and progressive are often used interchangeably, but should they be? In our journey today, we will distinguish between the two. While progressive typically refers to the politically left, liberal encompasses a broader spectrum, reflecting Enlightenment values such as individual rights, civil liberties, democracy, and free enterprise. It's like trying to differentiate between a cupcake and a muffin. They might look similar, but there are subtle distinctions that make each unique. As we navigate through the intricate web of political ideologies, let's not confine ourselves to the horizontal axis of the political spectrum. Instead, let's introduce a vertical dimension, the ladder. Imagine climbing this ladder, with thinkers positioned at varying heights based on their approach to politics. It's not just about what they think, but how they think. Now, let's take a closer look at 4 political thinkers. On the left, we have 2 individuals who share common ground, as do the 2 on the right. But what's truly fascinating is that the thinkers on the higher rungs, despite differing views, share a unique mindset when it comes to politics. It's like observing a group of hikers on a mountain different paths, but a similar adventurous spirit unites them. While we excel at categorizing people based on their political beliefs along the horizontal spectrum, we often neglect the vertical dimension. It's like having a 2-story house, but only focusing on the ground floor. We must not overlook the nuanced distinctions between high-rung and low-rung thinking in our political discourse. Contrary to popular belief, the term center doesn't capture the essence of high-rung thinking. It's not just about occupying the middle ground. Similarly, labeling someone from the far left as a zealot oversimplifies their nuanced perspectives. That's where terms like high-rung and low-rung come into play, enriching our vocabulary and enabling us to articulate complex ideas more effectively. So, as we embark on this intellectual journey, let's set aside the horizontal distinctions momentarily and direct our attention to the vertical aspect of politics. By redefining our language and broadening our perspective, we can gain a deeper understanding of the diverse ideologies that shape our political landscape. High-Rung Politics. Welcome, students, to a fascinating world where politics transcends mere rhetoric and dives deep into the realms of truth and rational decision-making. Imagine a place where ideas are not just thrown around haphazardly, but are carefully examined like precious gems for their flaws and brilliance. This is the world of high-rung politics. In this elevated plane of political discourse, individuals are encouraged not to cling blindly to their convictions, but to approach political discussions with an open mind, humility, and a thirst for knowledge. Here, political viewpoints are not weapons to be brandished aggressively, but tools for constructive debate and intellectual growth. Now, don't be mistaken, high-rung politics is not a utopian fantasy where everyone gets along harmoniously. On the contrary, it's a battlefield of ideas, where opposing viewpoints clash in a symphony of vigorous debates. Yet, amidst the chaos, a culture of intellectual diversity and independent thought prevails, fostering an environment where the highest value is placed on truth. Within the realm of high-rung politics, 3 fundamental questions guide the discourse. Firstly, what is? Imagine dissecting the current state of affairs, understanding the population dynamics, policies in place, and the challenges faced by the nation. This domain is akin to a political science laboratory where scholars analyze the status quo with precision. Secondly, what should be? Here, philosophical debates take center stage. Thinkers engage in passionate discussions about the ideal political systems, ethical dilemmas, and moral imperatives that shape our society. Should the government intervene in certain areas? What constitutes equal opportunity? The battleground of ideas is vast and complex. Lastly, how do we get from what is to what should be? Bridging the gap between reality and the ideal requires strategic thinking and innovation. Even like-minded individuals can diverge on the best approach to achieve shared goals, leading to nuanced discussions and healthy debates. In the landscape of high-rung politics, 2 powerful forces, the progressive and conservative jennies, shape the discourse. Unlike rigid labels, these jennies represent fluid ideologies that adapt to the complexity of political issues. Progressives drive change and innovation, while conservatives provide a vital check against hasty reforms, ensuring that valuable traditions are preserved. Moreover, high-rung politics is not confined to the mainstream ideologies, but also embraces radical progressive and far-right conservative mindsets. These outliers, though prone to extremism, play a crucial role in challenging the status quo and pushing the boundaries of conventional wisdom. In the grand tapestry of political debates, the spectrum battles between left and right unfold, oscillating between globalization and national interests, capitalism and government regulation, and social justice and potential backlash. Despite the fervor of these debates, High-Rung Politics reminds us that ultimately, we are all allies striving to ascend the same mountain, albeit through diverse paths. However, lurking beneath the surface lies our primitive minds, with their innate tendencies towards tribalism and conflict. Even the most astute high-rung thinkers can succumb to low-rung thinking when emotions run high in political discourse. The pull of ancient cognitive biases reminds us that the journey towards enlightened political dialogue is fraught with challenges. So, as we navigate the intricate landscape of high-rung politics, let us remember that while the battle of ideas rages on, the ultimate goal remains the same: to build a more perfect union through collaboration, wisdom, and a relentless pursuit of truth in a world where the stakes are high and the minds are even higher. Low-Rung Politics, aka Political Disney World. We're diving into the mesmerizing world of low-rung politics, also known as Political Disney World. Yes, you heard me right. I'm not talking about Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck, but rather a complex analogy to the overly simplified, black and white narratives we often see in Disney movies. Now, picture this. Imagine being enthralled by Disney's classics like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. We all have our favorite Disney movies that we hold dear to our hearts, but have you ever pondered why we gravitate towards them? Could it be that these films were released during our formative years, solidifying them as the best in our minds? Stepping into the realm of low-rung politics, it becomes apparent that many individuals view the world through a Disney movie lens. In Disney movies, characters are either entirely good or entirely bad, simplifying the nuances of real life into a digital code of ones and zeros. However, the real world is a myriad of gray areas, complexities, and imperfections, far from the binary portrayal in Disney films. As we journey deeper into the comparison between real life and Disney movies, we discover that political discourse often mirrors Political Disney World. Here, individuals are divided into factions akin to kingdoms, each crafting their narratives and worldviews akin to a customized Disney movie for their tribe. In the US, you have the Democratic Disney Kingdom and the Republican Disney Kingdom, each painting the other as the enemy threatening their ideals of utopia and progress. Within Political Disney World, narratives are all-encompassing, reducing complex debates into a checklist of issues with a good stance and an evil stance, akin to the protagonist and antagonist roles in Disney movies. Conspiracy theories, once debunked, find a home in this world, continually perpetuated to suit the narrative of the tribe. Moreover, low-rung politics erodes moral consistency, fostering an us vs. them mentality that distorts empathy and principles. Members of the group are lauded for behaviors deemed reprehensible in opponents, leading to rampant hypocrisy and a skewed sense of morality. As individuals navigate their political allegiance, they often find themselves making exceptions to their principles depending on which team they support, a phenomenon akin to a Venn diagram with shifting loyalties. In the colorful landscape of Political Disney World, low-rung tactics reign supreme, where power games and dirty tactics are fair play in the pursuit of victory. Golems, driven by tribalism and the primitive mind, safeguard their positions through any means necessary, be it censorship, voter suppression, or even physical violence. So, as we dissect the intricacies of low-rung politics, it's crucial to evaluate where we stand on the political ladder. Are we entrenched in a narrative that aligns too perfectly with one side? Do we demonize our opponents and lack empathy towards them? These reflections serve as guiding lights to navigate the treacherous waters of Political Disney World and ascend to the higher rungs of political discourse. As we unravel the layers of low-rung politics, Remember, the quest for truth, moral consistency, and fairness is the compass that can lead us out of the whimsical yet perilous realm of political Disney World. Let's strive to transcend the primitive instincts that fuel tribalism and forge a path towards a more enlightened political landscape. The Golem immune system. Imagine a world where belief reigns supreme, where conformity is the lifeblood, and doubt is the cancer threatening its very existence. In this world, golems exist, giant mythical creatures, fueled by a unified narrative believed by their members. The stronger the belief, the mightier the golem. However, doubt is the golem's Achilles heel, weakening it from within. To combat this, the golem has an immune system with three crucial mechanisms. Firstly, the golem filters information like a gatekeeper, controlling what circulates within its system. In today's society of free speech and the internet, this becomes a challenge. The media, acting as the golem's first line of defense, sensationalizes stories that confirm the narrative, while downplaying or neglecting those that challenge it. Cherry-picking becomes an industrial-scale operation, all to maintain the trust of the golem's members. Secondly, social pressure and echo chamber culture acts as the second filter, keeping individuals towing the narrative line. People are categorized into believers and pretenders, with outward conformity being the prized virtue. Doubt within one's mind is benign, but expressing it poses a threat to the golem's system. Moreover, information twisting, the golem's second tactic, involves misrepresenting reality and arguments to fit the narrative. Logical fallacies thrive in the depths of low-rung politics, shaping a distorted version of reality. Trend anecdote swapping and correlation causation mix-ups become tools to mold information according to the golem's narrative. The straw man fallacy makes appearances in political debates, conjuring weak counterarguments, while the Mott and Bailey fallacy serves as a defensive shield. These fallacies, along with the ad hominem fallacy discrediting ideas based on the speaker, perpetuate a warped version of reality within the golem's world. Additionally, confirmation bias acts as a final safeguard, solidifying belief within the tribe despite dissenting views or evidence. Social, intellectual, and self-esteem dependencies glue members to the narrative, turning dissent into a threat that triggers fight or flight responses. Political Disney World, the land of sprawling Baileys and Mott Hills, thrives on filtering and twisting information to protect the narrative. Yet, High-Rung Politics, embodied by Jennies, operates on a different paradigm. Without the shackles of a fixed narrative, Jennies welcome dissenting voices and ideas, seeking truth through open discourse, debate, and moral consistency. The National Tug-of-War. Imagine the U.S. political scene as a vast tug-of-war match, not between two teams, but between high-rung politics and low-rung power games. In one corner, we have high-rung politics, where liberal laws align with a liberal culture, fostering progress and positive change for the nation. This side represents the vision of a more perfect union, where the U.S. giant ascends the mountain of improvement. However, lurking in the shadows is the opponent, the power-hungry golems, playing by an ancient rulebook, their zero-sum game often hindering the nation's advancement. Picture the United States as a colossal organism facing an internal struggle between these two forces. During eras favoring high-rung politics, the giant strides upwards, but when the golems gain dominance, the giant falters on its ascent. Yet, this tug-of-war is not a flaw in the system, but rather a natural balance akin to an ecosystem. Just like in nature, where predator and prey maintain equilibrium in an ecosystem. In the U.S., the coexistence of high-rung and low-rung cultures forms a delicate balance. This equilibrium prevents the dominance of either extreme, ensuring that the nation does not fall prey to a totalitarian regime or descend into chaos. The founders envisioned a progression towards a more enlightened society, where steps forward outweigh steps backward. Throughout history, the U.S. has largely upheld this ideal, with each generation seeing improvements over the past. Nevertheless, as ecosystems shift, social ecosystems can also face destabilizing changes. In a thought-provoking analogy to nature, we are reminded that our societal environment, built on principles of reason and fairness, is a fragile construct requiring constant vigilance. Just as a disturbance in one part of an ecosystem ripples through the rest, so too can small changes in our society lead to chaos, challenging the status quo. Consider a study from 2016, which exposed participants to conflicting views. Interestingly, the brain's response to political challenges differed from non-political ones, engaging emotional and self-identity regions more intensely. This neurological insight sheds light on how deeply ingrained our political beliefs are and why changing someone's mind on political matters is notoriously challenging. Before we conclude, let's humorously tip our hats to Pinocchio, a childhood favorite that weaved themes of self-discovery and the consequences of falsehoods. Just as Pinocchio learned valuable lessons on his journey, we too must navigate the complexities of the National Tug-of-War with wisdom and discernment. Chapter 3: The Downward Spiral. We find ourselves in the United States, a diverse nation with a rich and tumultuous history of group conflicts: Loyalist vs. Revolutionary, Federalist vs. Anti-Federalist, North vs. South, Homegrown vs. Immigrant. The country has seen periods of intense political strife, like the years following George Washington's presidency, the lead up to the Civil War, and the turn of the 20th century. But it has also known times of relative calm, such as the post-World War Women II era, when the existential threat of global communism and the shared sacrifice of the war effort fostered a sense of national unity. The 1950s exemplify this political unity. The two main parties, Democrats and Republicans, are so ideologically mixed that voters often struggle to tell them apart. When national hero Dwight Eisenhower considers running for president, it's not even clear which party he'll choose. But this is not an era without division, it's merely dispersed, with some citizens focused on local issues, others on state or national politics, and still others fired up by the Cold War raging internationally. Beneath this tranquil surface, however, tensions simmer. A fringe movement, the Republican fundamentalists, is slowly gaining steam. Descended from the McCarthyites of the previous decade, they're pulled ever rightward by a rigid ideology that brooks no compromise, viewing politics as a zero-sum struggle between good and evil. As the 60s unfold in a whirlwind of societal change, the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, the rise of the new left the political tribes that once dispersed their ire across local, state, and national levels begin to coalesce around a single national divide between left and right. Simultaneously, another shift is underway. Americans are becoming more educated and more mobile, increasingly choosing to live among the like-minded. It starts imperceptibly a slight preference for familiarity, magnified by opportunities for migration. But bit by bit, neighborhoods transform. A 20% bias toward living near similar folks becomes near total segregation as conservatives flock together and progressives cluster elsewhere. Intermarriage across party lines grows ever rarer. In these isolated silos, different lived realities take shape, each group increasingly unable to understand the other's perspective. The media, once a force for integration, begins to splinter in order to cater to these divergent realities. Narrowcast outlets arise on cable TV and talk radio, each a mirror held up to their audience's pre-existing beliefs and grievances. Internet algorithms amplify the divide, serving up content carefully tailored to maximize engagement, and study after study shows that outrage reliably grabs eyeballs. Extreme voices, once confined to the lonely fringes, are handed a megaphone to spread their views far and wide. In the miasma of online forums and comment sections, conspiracy theories flourish unchecked, untethered from any factual anchor. Gradually, imperceptibly, the perceptions of left and right spiral ever further from each other, and from any shared reality. On issue after issue, even the basic facts are in dispute. Is crime rising or falling? Are racial minorities being helped too little by government programs or unfairly advantaged? Social media feeds seethe with dehumanizing invective directed at the other side. They're not just wrong, they're stupid, brainwashed, even evil. Studies show political animus mounting to exceed even racial prejudice in some cases. Each group retreats further into its own echo chamber, growing ever more convinced of its righteousness and the other side's malevolence. In the realm of politics, the ground shifts beneath everyone's feet. The center cannot hold as hyper-partisans on the wings gain sway, pulling their parties toward the extremes. Moderate voices are drowned out or pushed aside, derided as sellouts or collaborators with the enemy. Voters, angered by the relentless demonization of their side, hunger for champions who will take the fight to the opposition, norms be damned. Civility, toleration, forbearance, the soft guardrails that long kept the system stable are trampled in the rush for partisan advantage. No one wants to disarm unilaterally, so the arms race ratchets ever upward. Neutral institutions of government become weapons to wield rather than tools for governance. Once routine procedures, like raising the debt ceiling or approving nominees, are weaponized in an all-out struggle for power. To the public, it looks increasingly like a rigged game, a corrupt system incapable of getting anything done. A crisis of trust brews as citizens lose faith that their government serves the collective good rather than narrow factional interests. Why even participate in such a broken system? A polity polarized into two distrustful, antagonistic tribes, each refracted through its own separate reality, proves fertile ground for demagogues peddling simplistic solutions and neatly packaged scapegoats. Only a strong leader can cut through the gridlock and save us from them. Comes the cry, and piece by piece, the stage is set for a slide into authoritarianism. Norms that seemed inviolable, like respecting the peaceful transfer of power, start to wobble. Partisans increasingly view the stakes of losing as existential, rationalizing away the guardrails as mere obstacles to achieving their righteous ends. America thus finds itself slipping downward in a vicious spiral, the centripetal forces of liberal democracy slowly overcome by the centrifugal pull of hypercharged tribalism. Those who sounded early warnings were dismissed as alarmists. It can't happen here, right? But their ranks grow with each passing year as the dysfunction mounts and the rhetoric heats up. Only the most naively optimistic still believe that some natural pendulum will inevitably swing back to a stable equilibrium. The rest survey the scene with foreboding, wondering nervously just how far the unraveling might go if left unchecked. Some compare it to a merry-go-round, spinning ever faster, its riders too enthralled by the dizzying motion to notice the bolts shaking loose. Others see tectonic plates pulling apart, the pressure building silently until one day the earthquake comes. However one envisions it, a sense of deep unease has settled across the land, a suspicion that we're living on borrowed time. Conversations once off limits now take place in hushed tones. Could we be headed for another civil war? The question hangs heavy. How long until it all comes crashing down? History offers sobering parallels for those willing to heed them. From ancient Athens to the Roman Republic, from Weimar Germany to the former Yugoslavia, the story is disturbingly similar. A stable society, under mounting stress, slowly pulls apart at the seams. Demagogues arise, exploiting the cracks. Institutions strain and then shatter under the pressure. By the time the people awaken to the danger, it's too late to stop the unraveling. But history also offers hope for those determined to find it. In our own Civil War, the Union ultimately held. During the Great Depression, Americans pulled together and persevered. In the Civil Rights era, a nation stirred its conscience and bent the arc toward justice. Time and again, when the chips were down, Americans found within themselves the wisdom and fortitude to renew their founding promise, however imperfectly. The question now is whether that reservoir of resilience remains sufficient for the challenges at hand, or whether this time is different. The stakes could hardly be higher. The fate of the American experiment hangs in the balance. Chapter 4: Rise of the Red Golem. The 1960s are a time of upheaval in America, and the Republican Party is no exception. Beneath the surface of this grand old party, a fierce battle for its soul is underway. Four factions, each with its own vision for the future, vie for control. There are the Rockefeller Republicans in the Northeast, the Midwestern Conservatives, the Western Libertarians, and the Southern Conservatives. It's a broad coalition, held together more by a shared opposition to the Democrats than any unified ideology. But there's a fifth force emerging, one that will soon throw this delicate balance into disarray: the Republican Fundamentalists, or RFS for short. They're a different breed, altogether militant, uncompromising, and utterly convinced of their own righteousness. In their black and white worldview, there's no room for nuance or negotiation. You're either with them or against them, a true believer or a traitor to the cause. The RFS have a plan, and it starts at the grassroots. They set their sights on the Young Republicans, the party's influential youth wing. At the 1963 Young Republican National Convention, RF operatives go to work behind the scenes, manipulating parliamentary procedures to seize control. It's a master class in hardball politics. The moderates hardly know what hit them. In the end, the RFS walk away with the chairmanship and a platform that reads like a fundamentalist fantasy: abolishing the federal income tax, withdrawing from the UN, and doubling down on segregation. Emboldened by their success, the RFS turn to California. They're playing the long game now, backing hardline conservatives in every race from dogcatcher on up. Moderate incumbents are caught flat-footed, unsure how to handle these new tactics. They appeal to party unity, to tradition and decorum. The RFS just go for the jugular. When the dust settles, the California GOP is firmly in fundamentalist hands. But the real prize is the 1964 presidential nomination, and the RFS have their man, Arizona Senator Barry Goldwater. Goldwater is the ultimate true believer, a man who once famously declared that extremism in defense of liberty is no vice. When he takes the stage at the Republican National Convention to accept the nomination, it's a fundamentalist coming out party. The crowd goes wild as he denounces the growing menace in Washington and the moral decay afflicting the nation. It's us against them, good versus evil, and Goldwater promises to take the fight to the enemy. But here's the thing about the RFS. For all their talk of conservatism, they're not really about ideology at all. It's about power, getting it, keeping it, using it to crush their opponents. The ends justify the means, always. So what if Goldwater has to play footsie with the John Birch Society and its conspiracy theories? Who cares if his delegates boo and catcall moderate speakers off the stage? This is war, and the RFS are playing to win. In the end, of course, they lose. Goldwater gets clobbered by Lyndon Johnson in one of the biggest landslides in American history. But the RFS have left their mark. They've shown that with enough discipline and ruthlessness, a committed minority can capture a major party and bend it to their will. The high-rung conservatives, with their antiquated notions of civility and fair play, are left grasping at air. Flash forward to the 1980s. The RFS are in retreat, beaten back by years of electoral drubbings. But then along comes Ronald Reagan, the great communicator. Reagan looks like a fundamentalist dream, a true blue conservative, a man who talks tough and carries a big stick. But he's also got something else, charisma, and loads of it. When Reagan speaks, people listen. He spins grand visions of a shining city on a hill, a beacon of freedom in a world gone mad. He makes conservatism sound not just reasonable, but noble, even romantic. Under Reagan's big tent, the squabbling factions of the GOP find common cause. The moderates appreciate his pragmatism, his willingness to cut deals and find common ground. The hardliners love his tough talk on the Soviets and his promise to slash taxes and regulations. Even the RFS are mollified after all. Reagan is one of their own, a Goldwaterite from way back. But there's trouble brewing beneath the surface. For all his conservative bona fides, Reagan is no ideologue. He's a politician first and foremost, willing to bend when circumstances demand it. He raises taxes when the deficit balloons, grants amnesty to millions of undocumented immigrants, even sits down with the dreaded Soviets to hash out arms control. To the purists in the RF camp, it's a betrayal of everything they stand for. As the Reagan era wanes, the hardliners reassert themselves. They find new champions in firebrands like Newt Gingrich and Tom DeLay, men who see politics as a blood sport. Gingrich, the ringleader, hones a slash and burn style that makes Reagan's tough talk sound like a bedtime story. He teaches a whole generation of Republicans that the way to win is not through ideas or persuasion, but by demonizing the opposition and never giving an inch. Meanwhile, a new breed of right-wing media is on the rise. Talk radio stars like Rush Limbaugh and cable firebrands like Bill O'Reilly perfect the art of the perpetual outrage machine. They tell their listeners that liberals are not just misguided, but actively evil, a fifth column working to destroy the American way of life. Any compromise is tantamount to surrender. It's a worldview tailor-made for the RFS, and they embrace it with gusto. As the new millennium dawns, the Republican Party is a changed animal. The old guard, with their quaint notions of bipartisanship and civil discourse, have been shoved aside. In their place is a new generation of hardliners, steeped in the Gingrich playbook and the Limbaugh liturgy. They see politics as an all-or-nothing proposition, a zero-sum game where the only way to win is to pummel the other side into submission. When Barack Obama is elected in 2008, the hardliners see their chance. They paint the new president as a radical socialist, a Manchurian candidate bent on destroying America from within. They vow to block his every move, to make him a one-term president at any cost. The Tea Party movement emerges, a grassroots uprising fueled by fury and Facebook. Suddenly, even the most hardline Republicans are looking over their shoulders, afraid of being primaried by someone even more extreme. But the real turning point comes in 2016, with the rise of Donald Trump. Trump is the Frankenstein's monster of the RF movement, a creature stitched together from bits and pieces of Goldwater, Gingrich, and Limbaugh. He's got the fundamentalist zeal, the take-no-prisoners attitude, the utter disdain for the norms and niceties of traditional politics. But he's also got something else, a gut-level understanding of the power of spectacle, of how to capture the public's attention and never let it go. Trump barrels through the Republican primaries like a freight train, leaving a pack of shell-shocked establishment candidates in his wake. He breaks every rule in the political playbook, insulting war heroes, mocking the disabled, bragging about sexual assault, and his support only grows. To the RFS, he's a revelation, a walking, talking middle finger to the powers that be. When Trump defies the odds and wins the presidency, it's the final triumph of the fundamentalists. They've spent decades working to remake the Republican Party in their own image, and now they have their man in the White House. But it quickly becomes clear that Trump is no ordinary president. He governs by tweet and tantrum, lashing out at anyone who dares to cross him. He cozies up to dictators and alienates allies, turns the Oval Office into a reality TV set. As the 2020 election approaches, Trump makes it clear that he has no intention of going quietly. He rails against mail-in ballots, sows doubt about the integrity of the vote, even suggests that he might not accept the results if he loses. When the votes are counted and Joe Biden is declared the winner, Trump refuses to concede. He insists that the election was rigged, that he was robbed of a second term by a vast conspiracy of Democrats, deep state operatives, and foreign powers. In the weeks that follow, Trump and his allies file a barrage of lawsuits challenging the results in swing states. They pressure state officials to overturn the will of the voters, even urge Republican-controlled legislatures to appoint their own slates of electors. When all else fails, They summon a mob to the Capitol on January 6th, whipping them into a frenzy with baseless claims of fraud and exhortations to fight like hell. The result is a deadly insurrection, a shocking assault on the very heart of American democracy. In the aftermath of January 6th, a few brave Republicans stand up and speak out. They denounce Trump and his enablers, call for a return to sanity and the rule of law, but they are drowned out by a chorus of equivocation and excuse-making. The party's leaders, terrified of Trump's hold on the base, tie themselves in knots to avoid offending him. They oust Liz Cheney from her leadership post for the crime of telling the truth, elevate the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz to the status of folk heroes. As the dust settles, it becomes clear that the Republican Party has been irrevocably transformed. The old guard, the keepers of the Reagan flame, have been routed. In their place is a new breed of Republican, one that sees Trump not as an aberration, but as a template. They are the heirs of Goldwater and Gingrich, of Limbaugh and Hannity, and they are ascendant. The rise of the Red Golem is a cautionary tale, a story of what happens when a political party abandons its principles in pursuit of power. It's a reminder that the guardrails of democracy are only as strong as the people who uphold them, and that even the mightiest of institutions can crumble if they are hollowed out from within. But it's also a story that is still being written. The Republican Party stands at a crossroads, caught between its better angels and its darkest impulses. Will it find its way back to the high ground of Lincoln and Roosevelt, of Eisenhower and Reagan? Or will it continue its descent into the abyss of authoritarianism and demagoguery? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain: the fate of the American experiment hangs in the balance. For if the party of Lincoln becomes the party of Trump, if the defenders of liberty become the agents of its undoing, then the shining city on the hill will be lost forever. And that is a fate too terrible to contemplate. Chapter 5: Social Justice, High and Low. In the sprawling landscape of American social movements, a new fault line has emerged in recent years, one that threatens to swallow the progressive left whole. On one side stand the old guard, the traditionalists who march under the banner of liberal social justice LSJ. On the other, a rising tide of young firebrands who pledge fealty to a creed known as social justice fundamentalism SJF. To understand this schism, we must first understand its roots. For the LSJ old guard, the North Star has always been those immortal words enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They see America's story as one long, fitful struggle to live up to that founding promise, from the abolition of slavery to women's suffrage to the civil rights movement. Each generation has taken up the torch anew, striving to narrow the gap between the nation's lofty ideals and its earthly realities. LSJ advocates are reformers, not revolutionaries. They believe in working within the system, using the tools of liberal democracy, reason, debate, free speech, the ballot box to bend the arc of history toward justice. They champion diversity and inclusion, but they define those terms broadly, welcoming a range of viewpoints and experiences. Above all, they believe in the fundamental goodness of the American project, even as they work to address its flaws and failings. But for a new generation of activists, this incremental approach is no longer enough. Weaned on critical theory and postmodernism, schooled in the language of privilege and oppression, they see liberalism not as a vehicle for progress, but as a tool of the dominant class. In their view, America's founding ideals were never meant to apply to everyone. They were a smokescreen, a way for white male elites to consolidate their power while paying lip service to equality. For these young radicals, the old LSJ playbook is worse than useless. It's actively harmful, a way of perpetuating the very injustices it claims to address. After all, how can you use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house? The only solution, they argue, is to burn the whole thing down and start anew. This is the worldview of social justice fundamentalism. and it's spreading like wildfire across college campuses, progressive organizations, and left-leaning spaces of all kinds. But what exactly is SJF, and how does it differ from its liberal cousin? At its core, SJF is a theory of power, who has it, who doesn't, and how it shapes every aspect of our lives. Drawing on the work of scholars like Derek Bell, Kimberlé Crenshaw, and Ibram X. Kendi, SJF posits that American society is fundamentally structured around identity-based hierarchies: race, gender, sexuality, and so on. Those at the top of these hierarchies, typically straight white males, enjoy unearned privileges and advantages, while those at the bottom face systemic barriers and discrimination at every turn. But SJF goes beyond merely describing these inequities. It seeks to dismantle them by any means necessary, and therein lies the rub. For in its zeal to tear down oppressive systems, SJF often ends up embracing tactics that are themselves oppressive, even illiberal. Take, for example, the concept of victimhood culture. In the old days of LSJ, activists were encouraged to develop thick skins, to shrug off minor slights and microaggressions in service of the greater goal. But in the SJF worldview, victimhood is a currency, a way of claiming moral authority and demanding redress. The more marginalized identities one can claim, the more intersectional one is, the more weight one's voice carries in the movement. This has led to a kind of arms race of oppression, where activists compete to be seen as the most aggrieved, the most victimized. Suddenly, everything is a microaggression. Everything is problematic. The slightest hint of discomfort or disagreement is labeled as harm, and those who inflict it are branded as bigots and oppressors. But it doesn't stop there. SJF also embraces a tactic known as concept creep, where the definitions of words like racism, sexism, and homophobia are steadily expanded to encompass an ever wider range of behaviors and beliefs. Suddenly, it's not enough to simply treat people equally regardless of their race. One must be actively anti-racist, constantly atoning for the sins of one's ancestors and working to dismantle systems of privilege. To be anything less is to be complicit in oppression.
This is where SJF starts to veer into troubling territory. By stripping away the context and nuance from these loaded terms, by applying them so broadly and indiscriminately, SJF activists risk trivializing the very real harms they seek to address. After all, if everything is racist, then nothing is.
But concept creep serves another purpose. As well, it's a way of controlling the discourse, of setting the terms of debate. By constantly moving the goalposts, by redefining words to mean whatever they want them to mean, SJF activists can shut down dissent and silence critics before they even open their mouths. Suddenly, voicing even the mildest objection to SJF orthodoxy is itself an act of oppression, a sign of one's privilege and fragility. This is the essence of the echo chamber, and it's a defining feature of SJF. In the old LSJ model, diversity of thought was a virtue, a way of testing ideas and arriving at truth through rigorous debate. But in the SJF worldview, ideological conformity is prized above all else. Dissent is not just disagreement, it's violence, a threat to the safety and well-being of marginalized communities. This has led to a culture of self-censorship and thought policing, where even the most progressive activists live in fear of saying the wrong thing, of being called out or canceled for some perceived transgression. In this environment, good faith disagreements become impossible. One either toes the party line or faces social and professional ostracism. But perhaps the most troubling aspect of SJF is its moral inconsistency. For all its talk of equity and inclusion, SJF is often guilty of applying double standards based on identity. Behavior that would be condemned as racist or sexist when committed by a member of a privileged group is often excused or even celebrated when committed by a member of a marginalized group. This is the inevitable result of a worldview that sees everything through the lens of power dynamics and group identity. When the only thing that matters is who has power over whom, then the actual content of one's character, one's actions, one's intentions, one's individual humanity becomes irrelevant. All that matters is which side of the oppressor-oppressed dichotomy one falls on. In the end, this is what separates SJF from its liberal predecessor. LSJ, for all its flaws and limitations, is fundamentally committed to the Enlightenment values of reason, individualism, and universal human rights. It sees people as complex, multifaceted beings, not just avatars of their race or gender or sexuality. It believes in the power of ideas to change hearts and minds, not just the power of coercion to enforce orthodoxy. SJF, on the other hand, is a postmodern creed, one that rejects the very notion of objective truth or universal values. It sees the world in terms of competing narratives and power structures, where what matters is not what is said, but who is saying it. It is a fundamentally illiberal ideology, one that prioritizes group identity over individual agency, emotional safety over free inquiry, and ideological purity over intellectual diversity.
This is not to say that SJF is entirely without merit. The movement has shone a harsh light on very real injustices and inequities in American society, and it has given voice to marginalized communities that have long been silenced or ignored. Its critiques of power and privilege are often incisive and thought-provoking, even if its proposed solutions are sometimes misguided or counterproductive.
But as SJF continues to gain traction on the left, it risks crowding out other, more liberal voices that believe in working within the system to achieve progress, that see people as individuals rather than identity groups, that believe in the power of reason and persuasion over coercion and conformity. This is the challenge facing the progressive movement today: how to harness the energy and passion of SJF while steering it in a more constructive, more liberal direction. How to address the very real injustices and inequities in American society without abandoning the values and principles that have made progress possible in the first place. It will not be an easy task. The siren song of SJF is seductive, particularly to young people who are eager to make a difference in the world and who have been steeped in its language and worldview from an early age. But if progressivism is to remain a vital and effective force for change, it must find a way to resist the pull of fundamentalism and chart a course back to the high ground of liberalism. This means embracing a more inclusive, more open-minded approach to social justice, one that welcomes a diversity of viewpoints and experiences, that sees people as complex individuals rather than identity groups, that believes in the power of reason and persuasion over coercion and conformity. It means being willing to engage in good faith dialogue with those who disagree, to consider alternative perspectives and ideas, to admit when one is wrong or uncertain. Above all, it means holding fast to the core values of liberalism, individual rights, free speech, due process, the rule of law, even in the face of intense pressure to abandon them in the name of social justice. For without these guardrails, without these bedrock principles, any movement for change will inevitably veer into authoritarianism and intolerance. The road ahead will be long and difficult, full of twists and turns and setbacks. But if progressivism can navigate this treacherous terrain, if it can chart a course between the scylla of reactionary conservatism and the Charybdis of illiberal fundamentalism, then it may yet prove equal to the challenges of our time. For in the end, the fight for social justice is not a zero-sum game between competing identity groups or ideological factions. It is a struggle for the soul of our democracy, for the very idea of America as a nation founded on the promise of liberty and equality for all. And in that struggle, we will need all the allies and ideas we can muster from all walks of life, from all points on the political spectrum. The alternative is too grim to contemplate a fractured and polarized society, where every difference is magnified into an existential threat, where every disagreement is met with recrimination and outrage, where the very foundations of liberal democracy are slowly eroded away by the tides of tribalism and extremism. That is the dystopian future that awaits us if we fail to heed the warnings, if we allow ourselves to be seduced by the siren song of fundamentalism in all its forms. But it is not too late to chart a different course, to rediscover the best of our liberal traditions and values, to build a more just and equitable society on a foundation of reason, empathy, and mutual understanding. The choice is ours. The future is unwritten, and the struggle for the soul of social justice and for the soul of America itself is only just beginning. Chapter 6: How to Conquer a College. In the misty forests of Washington State, a once vibrant liberal arts college finds itself in the throes of an existential crisis. Evergreen State College, long known for its progressive values and unconventional approach to education, is now a battleground in the war for the soul of higher learning. At the center of the maelstrom is Brett Weinstein, a biology professor with impeccable liberal credentials. For years, he has been a vocal advocate for social justice, using his platform to champion the rights of the marginalized and oppressed. But now, in the spring of 2017, he finds himself cast as the villain in a campus morality play. The catalyst for the crisis is a proposed change to the college's annual Day of Absence. Traditionally, this event has seen students and faculty of color voluntarily absent themselves from campus for a day, as a way of highlighting their vital contributions to the community. But this year, the organizers have a new twist in mind. They want white students and faculty to stay away instead. For Weinstein, this is a bridge too far. In an email to his colleagues, he objects to the idea of racially segregating the campus, even for a day. There is a huge difference between a group or coalition deciding to voluntarily absent themselves from a shared space in order to highlight their vital and underappreciated roles, he writes, and a group or coalition encouraging another group to go away. The first, he argues, is a powerful call to consciousness. The second is an act of oppression. Weinstein's email is meant to start a dialogue, to spark a thoughtful discussion about the complex issues of race and identity in higher education. Instead, it ignites a firestorm. Within hours, a group of student protesters descends on Weinstein's classroom, demanding his immediate resignation. They accuse him of racism, of white supremacy, of creating an unsafe environment for students of color. They bang on the windows and shout him down as he tries to respond, chanting, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, Brett Weinstein has got to go." The protests quickly spiral out of control. Students march on the administration building, holding the president and other senior officials hostage until their demands are met. They blockade the entrances with furniture, shouting, "No cops on campus," and "Black Lives Matter." Through it all, the college's leadership is paralyzed, unable or unwilling to defend the basic liberal principles of free speech and open inquiry. In the end, Weinstein is forced to resign, his career and reputation in tatters. His wife, Heather Hang, a fellow professor at Evergreen, goes with him. The college, once a bastion of progressive education, is left reeling, its future uncertain. The implosion of Evergreen State College is a microcosm of a larger crisis in American higher education. Across the country, a new orthodoxy is taking hold, one that elevates the values of social justice and identity politics above all else. Dissent is silenced, debate is stifled, and intellectual diversity is sacrificed on the altar of ideological purity. At the heart of this crisis is the rise of what we might call idea supremacy, the notion that certain ideas are so sacred, so beyond reproach, that they cannot be challenged or questioned without grave consequences. And nowhere is this phenomenon more pronounced than in the realm of social justice. On campus after campus, the principles of social justice fundamentalism (SJF) have become the dominant paradigm, shaping everything from curriculum to campus culture to the very language used to discuss complex social issues. Those who dare to dissent, whether students, faculty, or outside speakers, find themselves facing a fierce backlash, one that can range from social ostracism to professional ruin. The consequences of this idea supremacy are profound, and they extend far beyond the ivory tower. As the rising generation of leaders and thinkers is steeped in the dogmas of SJF, they carry those ideas with them into the wider world, shaping our politics, our culture, and our public discourse in ways that are only beginning to be understood. But how did we get here? How did a movement that began with the noble goal of creating a more just and equitable society become an illiberal force on campus and beyond? The answer lies in a complex web of factors, from the increasing political homogeneity of the academy to the weaponization of social media to the failure of those in positions of power to stand up for liberal values in the face of intense pressure. At the most basic level, the rise of idea supremacy on campus can be traced to a fundamental shift in the demographics of higher education. Over the past few decades, the professoriate has become increasingly dominated by those on the left end of the political spectrum. In some fields, particularly in the humanities and social sciences, the imbalance is staggering. A recent study found that Democrats outnumber Republicans by a ratio of nearly 12 to 1. This ideological homogeneity has created an environment where certain ideas, particularly those associated with SJF, are elevated to the status of unassailable truth, while others are dismissed or demonized as beyond the pale. Dissenting voices are rare, and those who do speak out often find themselves facing severe social and professional consequences. At the same time, the issues of social justice and identity have taken on a kind of sacred status on many campuses, with any perceived slight or offense elevated to the level of a moral emergency. In this climate, even the most minor disagreements can quickly escalate into full-blown crises, with accusations of racism, sexism, or other forms of bigotry flying fast and furious. The result is a kind of feedback loop, where the dominant ideology becomes ever more entrenched, and the penalties for dissent become ever more severe. This dynamic is reinforced by the rise of social media, which allows outrage to spread like wildfire and mobs to form at the click of a button. The consequences of this idea supremacy are felt in every corner of campus life. In the realm of expression, speakers who challenge the SJF orthodoxy are routinely disinvited or shouted down, while student journalists who run afoul of the prevailing wisdom find themselves facing censorship or worse. In the classroom, professors who question the dogmas of identity politics or suggest alternative perspectives are often met with student complaints or even formal disciplinary action. Even the pursuit of knowledge itself is not immune. Research that challenges the SJF narrative, whether on issues of gender, race, or other sensitive topics, is increasingly seen as off-limits, with scholars who dare to venture into these areas risking their careers and reputations. Perhaps nowhere is the impact of idea supremacy more pronounced than in the realm of education itself. Across the country, colleges and universities are incorporating SJF concepts into their curricula and even their graduation requirements. Students are required to take courses in social justice or diversity, often taught from a narrow and ideologically charged perspective. At the K-12 level, the influence of SJF is growing as well, with schools across the country adopting anti-racist curricula and diversity training programs that often veer into the realm of political indoctrination. Teachers and administrators who question these initiatives or suggest alternative approaches find themselves facing intense pressure to conform or risk losing their jobs. The result is a generation of students who are being steeped in the dogmas of SJF from an early age, often without exposure to competing ideas or perspectives. This intellectual monoculture is deeply troubling, not just for the students themselves, but for the future of our democracy. After all, the very purpose of a liberal education is to expose students to a wide range of ideas and perspectives, to teach them to think critically and independently, and to equip them with the tools they need to navigate a complex and rapidly changing world. But in the current climate, this ideal is increasingly being sacrificed on the altar of ideological conformity. The consequences of this failure are far-reaching. Students who are not exposed to a diversity of viewpoints and who are not taught to engage with ideas that challenge their own are ill-equipped to function as informed and engaged citizens. They are more likely to retreat into echo chambers of their own making, to view those with different perspectives as enemies rather than interlocutors, and to see the world in simplistic terms of good and evil. At the same time, the spread of SJF beyond the campus gates is having a profound impact on our wider society. As graduates steeped in these ideas enter the workforce and assume positions of power and influence, they bring with them a worldview that is often intolerant of dissent and hostile to the very notion of open inquiry and debate. We see this dynamic playing out in the corporate world, where a growing number of companies are adopting diversity and inclusion programs that often veer into the realm of political indoctrination. We see it in the media, where a narrow range of acceptable opinions on issues of race, gender, and identity are increasingly enforced, and those who question the prevailing wisdom are often targeted for cancellation. And we see it in our politics, where the language and concepts of SJF are increasingly being weaponized by activists and politicians alike, often in ways that are deeply illiberal and anti-democratic. The rise of idea supremacy on campus, then, is not just a crisis for higher education. It is a crisis for our society as a whole, one that threatens the very foundations of liberal democracy. If we are to address this crisis, we must start by recognizing the problem for what it is. We must be willing to stand up for the values of free speech, open inquiry, and intellectual diversity, even in the face of intense pressure to conform. We must create spaces on campus and beyond where dissenting voices can be heard and alternative perspectives can be explored. This will not be an easy task. The forces of idea supremacy are powerful and deeply entrenched, and they will not give up their hold on our institutions without a fight. But the stakes could not be higher. At its best, higher education is a force for enlightenment and progress, a place where young minds are challenged and expanded, where new ideas are born and old ones are rigorously tested. But when it succumbs to the siren song of ideological conformity, when it becomes a place where certain ideas are sacred and others are forbidden, it betrays its deepest purpose. The story of Evergreen State College is a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly and easily even the most progressive institutions can fall prey to the forces of illiberalism. But it is also a call to action, a summons to all those who believe in the power of ideas to come together in defense of the values that make true learning possible. The road ahead will not be easy, and the challenges we face are daunting. But if we are to create a society that is truly just and equitable, if we are to build a world where all voices can be heard and all perspectives can be valued, we must start by reclaiming the soul of higher education. We must dare to stand up for the principles of liberal democracy, even in the face of those who would seek to silence us. The alternative is a future where the pursuit of knowledge is subordinated to the demands of ideology, where the quest for truth is sacrificed on the altar of political correctness. It is a future where the very idea of a liberal education, one that empowers individuals to think for themselves and to engage with the world in all its complexity, becomes a relic of the past. That is not a future we can afford to accept. The stakes are too high, the consequences too grave. The fight for the soul of higher education is the fight for the soul of our society itself. It is a fight we must win for the sake of our children, our communities, and our democracy. The story of Evergreen State College may have ended in tragedy, but it need not be the final word. There is still time to change course, to reclaim the best of our liberal traditions, and to build a future where all ideas can be heard and all voices can be valued. But the hour is late, and the clock is ticking. The time for action is now. Chapter 7. How to Conquer a Society.
In the grand theater of American public life, a new kind of drama is unfolding. It's a story not of valiant heroes and dastardly villains, but of something more insidious, more corrosive to the very foundations of a free society. This is the story of idea supremacy and its rise to power through the machinations of a movement known as social justice fundamentalism, SJF.
To understand the threat posed by idea supremacy, we must first understand its tactics. Like a skilled martial artist, it advances step by step, each move calculated to exploit the vulnerabilities of a liberal democratic system. The first step on this illiberal staircase is speech control. It begins in the workplace, where the traditional American reverence for free expression is being steadily eroded. Employees now find themselves walking on eggshells, fearful that a stray word or an ill-considered tweet could cost them their livelihoods. The phenomenon of cancellation has become all too familiar, with careers and reputations destroyed over perceived transgressions against the SJF orthodoxy. But it's not just about punishing dissent. Equally troubling is the way SJF concepts are being actively promoted by major institutions. From corporate diversity training to university bias response teams, the language and ideas of SJF are being woven into the fabric of American professional life. Dissent is not just discouraged, but actively suppressed. Step 2 on the illiberal staircase is forced listening. It's no longer enough for SJF to silence opposing views. It must also ensure that its own doctrines are being heard and internalized. This is where mandatory diversity training comes in. Across the country, employees are being subjected to hours of instruction in SJF concepts like privilege, intersectionality, and systemic racism. Refusal to participate is not an option. Indeed, it's often grounds for disciplinary action. Even more concerning is the way these ideas are being presented, not as one perspective among many, but as unassailable truth. Trainees are not invited to critically examine SJF concepts, but rather to accept them as gospel. The result is a kind of forced indoctrination, a requirement that individuals not only tolerate SJF ideas, but actively affirm them. And it's not just in the workplace. The same dynamic is playing out in K-12 schools across America. Children as young as 5 are being taught to view the world through the lens of SJF, to see themselves and others primarily as members of oppressor or oppressed groups. Parents who object to this ideological inculcation often find themselves branded as bigots, their concerns dismissed or even punished. But the endgame of idea supremacy isn't just to control what people hear. It's to control what they say. This is step 3 on the illiberal staircase, forced speaking. It's a world where individuals are pressured to publicly declare their allegiance to SJF ideas, where failure to do so is taken as evidence of moral turpitude. We see this in the rituals of privilege checking and allyship, where individuals are expected to affirm their commitment to SJF principles as a prerequisite for social acceptance. We see it in the demand that people use their voice to support SJF causes, regardless of their personal beliefs or misgivings. Perhaps the most pernicious manifestation of this forced speech is the idea that silence is violence. It's a formulation that equates the failure to actively champion SJF ideas with complicity in oppression. To be silent is to be guilty, to be part of the problem rather than the solution. The result of all this, the speech controls, the forced listening, the compelled speech, is a kind of herd mentality, a society in which dissent becomes ever more costly and conformity ever more rewarded. It's a society in which the big brain, the collective intelligence and wisdom of a people begins to atrophy. We can see this dumbing down effect in the way SJF narratives have distorted public understanding on a range of complex issues. Take policing. The SJF account paints a picture of a systemically racist institution where innocent black men are routinely gunned down by bigoted cops. But the reality is far more nuanced. While there are undoubtedly instances of police misconduct, the data simply doesn't support the notion of an epidemic of racially motivated police shootings, or consider the gender wage gap. SJF orthodoxy holds that women are paid significantly less than men for the same work, a disparity attributed to pervasive sexism. But a closer look at the numbers tells a different story. When factors like job title, experience, and hours worked are taken into account, the wage gap narrows considerably. The reality is not a simple tale of patriarchal oppression, but a complex interplay of social, economic, and cultural forces. The same pattern plays out on issues from LGBTQ rights to affirmative action. The SJF narrative tends towards simplistic binaries: oppressor and oppressed, privileged and marginalized. But the truth is almost always more complicated, more ambiguous. By insisting on a single, orthodox interpretation of these issues, idea supremacy stifles the kind of nuanced discourse necessary for real understanding and progress. And the consequences extend beyond mere misunderstanding. Idea supremacy is, in the end, a gateway drug to even more sinister forms of illiberalism. Once you've accepted the premise that certain ideas are beyond dispute, that certain questions are off limits, you've opened the door to a whole host of authoritarian practices. We see this in the way explicit racial discrimination is making a comeback, this time in the name of equity. From government contracting to college admissions, individuals are increasingly being judged not by the content of their character, but by the color of their skin. The SJF rationale is that this kind of discrimination is necessary to correct for historical injustices, but the practical effect is a kind of neo-segregation, a system in which individual merit takes a backseat to crude racial categorization. We see it in the growth of corporate social credit systems, where businesses are pressured to toe the SJF line or face economic retaliation. Step outside the ever-shifting bounds of progressive orthodoxy, and you risk being cut off from basic services like banking and payment processing. It's a form of soft tyranny where ideological conformity is enforced not by the state, but by the cartelized power of woke capital. Perhaps most troublingly, we see idea supremacy's corrosive effect in the way erstwhile defenders of liberal values have been cowed into submission. The American Civil Liberties Union ACLU, once a stalwart champion of free speech and individual rights, has increasingly bent the knee to SJF pieties. Where the organization once defended the rights of neo-Nazis and other marginal groups to express their views, it now shies away from cases that might offend progressive sensibilities. The tragic irony is that, for all its talk of social justice, SJF is ultimately a betrayal of the very communities it claims to serve. By insisting on a rigid, ideological view of the world, it denies marginalized people the nuance, the complexity, the basic human dignity necessary for real empowerment. Take the way SJF reduces people of color to passive victims, stripped of agency and defined entirely by their oppression. Or the way it dismisses dissenting voices within minority communities as internalized racism or false consciousness. In the end, SJF's totalizing narrative leaves no room for individual experiences, no space for people to define their own identities and chart their own paths. And what of the SJF true believers, those who have fully bought into the ideology? For them, idea supremacy offers not liberation, but a kind of mental prison. To live in the world of SJF is to inhabit a realm of constant anxiety, where every interaction is fraught with the potential for offense, where the specter of privilege lurks around every corner. It's a world devoid of grace, where even the most well-intentioned misstep can brand one as an enemy of progress. This isn't to say that the issues SJF purports to address aren't real or urgent. Racism, sexism, homophobia, these are evils that any decent society must confront. But the SJF approach, with its thought policing and forced confessions, is a cure worse than the disease. It's a recipe not for social healing, but for deepening division and resentment. And then there's the final, bitter irony. For all its progressive pretensions, idea supremacy has proven to be an invaluable gift to the very reactionary forces it claims to oppose. Every canceled speaker, every Twitter mob, every struggle session becomes grist for the right-wing outrage machine. Demagogues and charlatans can point to the excesses of SJF and say, "See, this is what the left really thinks. This is what they want to do to you." In this way, idea supremacy breeds a kind of backlash, a sense among many ordinary people that progressive ideas are a threat to their way of life. It's a dynamic that's all too easily exploited by cynical operators who use the specter of wokeness gone wild to advance their own authoritarian agendas. The end result is a kind of doom loop, a self-perpetuating cycle of ideological escalation. The more the SGF left attacks liberal norms in the name of social justice, the more the illiberal right feels emboldened to do the same. And with each turn of the wheel, the space for reasoned debate, for good faith disagreement, grows ever smaller. It's a dynamic that threatens to hollow out the very foundations of a free society. Because idea supremacy, whether it comes from the left or the right, is ultimately anathema to the liberal values of open inquiry, individual autonomy, and the rule of law. It's a recipe for a world in which might makes right, where truth is subordinated to power, and where the only refuge lies in conformity to the prevailing orthodoxy. Confronting this threat will require more than just a reassertion of classical liberal principles, important as that is. It will require a fundamental rethinking of what it means to be a progressive in the 21st century. It will require the left to rediscover its commitment to free speech, to open debate, to the notion that no idea is beyond scrutiny or critique. Most of all, it will require a renewed sense of humility, a recognition that no single ideology or movement has a monopoly on truth. That real progress comes not from enforced consensus, but from the clash of competing ideas. That the path to a more just society lies not in the suppression of dissent, but in the hard work of persuasion and compromise. This is the challenge that now confronts us: to resist the siren song of idea supremacy, to defend the values of a free and open society against those who would seek to undermine them. It won't be easy. The temptations of dogmatism are strong, and the pressures to conform are immense. But the alternative, a world in which the only choices are submission or ostracization, is too grim to contemplate. In the end, the fight against idea supremacy is nothing less than the fight for the soul of our democracy. It's a fight that will require courage, conviction, and a willingness to speak uncomfortable truths. But it's a fight that we cannot afford to lose. For in a world where ideas are not free, no one is truly free, and that is an impoverishment none of us should be willing to accept. Changing course. In the grand sweep of human history, the story of our species is one of constant adaptation. From the savannas of Africa to the skyscrapers of modernity, we have proven ourselves to be a remarkably resilient and inventive creature, able to thrive in an astonishing range of environments. But for all our flexibility, there remains a fundamental tension at the heart of the human condition, a mismatch between our ancient instincts and the demands of the modern world. This is the central problem of our time. Human nature, forged in the crucible of prehistoric scarcity and danger, is ill-suited to the challenges of an era of abundance and exponential change. The same impulses that once kept us safe, the tendency to form tight-knit tribes, to fear outsiders, to respond to threats with aggression, now threaten to tear us apart. In a world of nuclear weapons and global pandemics, the consequences of our unchecked primitive drives could be catastrophic. But there is hope. For just as we have reshaped our physical environment to suit our needs, so too have we constructed systems of thought and governance to channel our baser instincts toward higher ends. Chief among these is the tradition of liberal democracy, an artificial habitat designed to cultivate the best of human nature while constraining the worst. At its core, liberal democracy is a machine for managing disagreement. It recognizes that in a diverse society, conflict is inevitable, that reasonable people can and will differ on fundamental questions of value and belief. But rather than allowing these differences to devolve into violence or oppression, liberalism seeks to transmute them into a source of strength. Through the alchemy of open debate, free inquiry, and the rule of law, it aims to forge a whole greater than the sum of its parts. This system, for all its flaws, has proven remarkably successful. Over the past 2 centuries, liberal democracies have generated unprecedented levels of peace, prosperity, and individual freedom. They have expanded the circle of moral concern to encompass ever wider swaths of humanity, breaking down barriers of race, gender, and creed that once seemed insurmountable. But today, this hard-won progress is under threat. The exponential growth of technology has unleashed forces that are straining the very foundations of liberal society. Social media platforms, once hailed as a boon to democratic discourse, have become engines of polarization and misinformation. Economic dislocation, driven by globalization and automation, has fueled a populist backlash against elites and institutions. Climate change, mass migration, and the specter of AI-driven unemployment loom on the horizon, portending an era of unprecedented disruption. In the face of these challenges, the siren song of tribalism grows ever more seductive. Demagogues and extremists, wielding the weapons of idea supremacy, promise a return to a mythical past of certainty and order. Across the political spectrum, people retreat into echo chambers of their own making, losing the capacity for empathy and good faith disagreement. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. So what is to be done? How can we, as individuals and as a society, navigate this treacherous landscape? The answer, I believe, lies in a renewed commitment to the core values of liberal democracy and a recognition that upholding those values begins with the choices we make in our own lives. The first step is awareness. We must recognize that none of us are immune to the cognitive biases and blind spots that distort our perception of reality. We are all prone to motivated reasoning, to seeking out information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs and dismissing that which challenges them. We are all susceptible to the lure of the mob, the rush of self-righteousness that comes from joining a cause or attacking a common enemy. Cultivating awareness means embracing humility, recognizing the limits of our own knowledge, and the possibility that we might be wrong. It means actively seeking out perspectives that differ from our own, not to demolish them, but to understand them. It means learning to spot the patterns of low-rung thinking in ourselves and in others, the knee-jerk reactivity, the black and white moralizing, the demonization of opponents. But awareness alone is not enough. The second step is courage. In an age of idea supremacy, true moral courage means being willing to stand up for liberal values, even when it comes at a personal cost. It means refusing to mouth pieties we don't believe, even if those around us are doing so. It means being willing to disagree with our own tribe, to break ranks with ideological allies when conscience demands it. This isn't easy. The pressure to conform, to go along to get along, can be immense, and the consequences of dissent, social ostracization, professional ruin, even physical danger are often all too real. But as the great civil rights leader Bayard Rustin once said, we need, in every community, a group of angelic troublemakers. These are the people who have the guts to speak truth to power, to stand up for the unpopular or the marginalized, to insist on the value of open debate and free inquiry. They are the ones who, in the words of Robert F. Kennedy, dream of things that never were and ask why not. Without them, the flame of liberal democracy will surely flicker and die. But courage, like awareness, is a muscle that must be exercised. It starts with small choices in the context of our daily lives. It means being willing to voice our true thoughts, first in private conversations with trusted friends, and then, gradually, in more public settings. It means being willing to listen, really listen, to those we disagree with, not to convince them, but to understand them as fellow human beings. Over time, These small acts of bravery can coalesce into something larger, a cultural shift towards greater openness, greater resilience in the face of challenge and change. They can help to create an environment where good faith debate is welcomed, where heterodox ideas can be expressed without fear of reprisal. In short, they can help to build a society that lives up to the highest ideals of the liberal democratic tradition. Will this be enough to save us from the centrifugal forces currently tearing at the fabric of liberal society? There are no guarantees. The challenges we face are immense, and the forces arrayed against us are formidable. It is all too easy to give in to despair, to conclude that the game is lost, and that the only viable option is to retreat into our respective corners and prepare for the coming unraveling. But I choose to believe that another future is possible. I choose to believe that the story of human progress is not yet over, that for all our flaws and fallibilities, we possess a remarkable capacity for reason, for empathy, for that most precious and fragile of commodities, hope. This belief is not naive optimism. It is grounded in the hard-won lessons of history, in the knowledge that time and again, when the chips were down, human beings have found within themselves the wisdom and the fortitude to bend the arc of the moral universe a little closer to justice. It is a belief that our better angels can and will prevail, if only we have the courage to summon them. This, then, is the task that lies before us: to resist the pull of fatalism and despair, to hold fast to the values that have made progress possible, and to do the hard work of building a society that reflects our highest aspirations. It will not be easy, and success is far from guaranteed. But as the old saying goes, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice if we have the strength to bend it. In the end, the story of liberal democracy is the story of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. It is the story of individuals who, faced with the choice between the easy comforts of conformity and the hard road of moral courage, choose the latter. It is the story of communities that, in the face of division and strife, find ways to come together and forge a common purpose. Most of all, it is the story of a never-ending struggle, the struggle to create a society in which every human being, regardless of race or creed or station, is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. This struggle has been the driving force behind every great social movement in modern history, from the abolition of slavery to the fight for women's suffrage to the civil rights revolutions of the 1960s. Today, that struggle continues. The specific challenges may be new, but the underlying principles are timeless. And though the forces of illiberalism and idea supremacy may seem ascendant in the moment, history tells us that they will not have the final word. For the human spirit is indomitable, and the thirst for freedom is universal. As long as there are those willing to stand up for these ideals, as long as there are angelic troublemakers ready to dream of things that never were and ask why not, the flame of liberal democracy will never be extinguished. This, ultimately, is the bright sky that lies beyond the gathering clouds of our current moment. It is the promise of a society that, for all its imperfections, strives to live up to the noble ideals enshrined in its founding documents, a society in which everyone, no matter their background or beliefs, has an equal chance to pursue their own version of the good life. Realizing that promise will require more than just hope. It will require hard work, sacrifice, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our world. But if we can summon the courage to face these challenges head-on, if we can learn to see beyond the narrow confines of tribe and ideology and embrace our common humanity, then I believe there is no limit to what we can achieve. The road ahead will be long and the obstacles formidable. But as we embark on this journey, let us draw strength from the words of the great American poet Walt Whitman. The strongest and sweetest songs yet remain to be sung. May we have the wisdom to listen for those songs and the courage to sing them. Wow, what a journey we've been on. Tim Urban's What's Our Problem is a masterclass in understanding the forces that shape our world and the role we can play in creating a better future. We hope our summary has done justice to Urban's groundbreaking work and left you with a renewed sense of purpose and possibility. Until next time, keep reading and keep thinking big.